change in Atlanta. So he grew up in that environment. But there were three things that we all must experience to say yes to the King in us. First, we must hear it. Secondly, we must see people doing it. And thirdly, we must experience it for ourselves. Let me tell you, let me first talk about hearing it. You see, Dr. King was one that was fascinated by the preached word. For those that knew him and remember him as a young child, he would sit in the first and the second row. And because of the statue of who his father was and who his grandfather was, who was the former pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, great speakers would come to Ebenezer during a time of social change, during a time in which places like Atlanta, Georgia produced and would welcome great minds and great speakers who would speak about social change and would fight against segregation and all of the oppression that they experienced. So as he sat there, he heard some of the great preachers from all around the world come and to talk about service and to talk about racism and segregation and talk about education and the importance for us to stand up and to be all that God has called us to be. So he heard it. Secondly, he saw it in action. He saw his father, Dr. Martin Luther King III, go downtown and protest. He saw Dr. Benjamin Mays, the president of Morehouse. He saw other colleagues of his father get out there and protest and to do the work. So he didn't just see people talking the talk, but he saw others walking the walk. And it's important for young people and for all of us to not only hear speeches like this, but to also see people put it on the line. See people not just preach great sermons, but get out among the masses and to fight for social justice and to take risks. Dr. King not only heard great words, but he saw it in action. And thirdly, he experienced it for himself. There's a story that Dr. King told that one day he and his father were downtown Atlanta, Georgia, at what was known as Rich's department store. And it was, if I have the story correctly, it was the weekend before Easter Sunday. Dr. King attended a prominent Baptist church, and as the tradition of the African American church, Easter was always a moment of celebration. And so if parents could afford it, they would go out and they would buy suits and buy nice ties and nice shirts, and so they would prepare themselves for Easter celebration. Well, on this weekend, one Saturday morning, Dr. King and his father, he was not Dr. King then, he was not even Martin King, he was actually born Michael King. And on this morning, he and his father were down at Rich's department store, and they picked out a suit. And his father was one of the most prominent and more popular preachers in the city. Wasn't wealthy, but had enough to pay for it. And he was there, he went to the woman at the cash register and said, I would like to buy this suit, but first, I would like him to try it on to make sure that he can fit it. And Martin, then Michael, was excited about it, the possibility of putting on the suit. And the woman looked at them, and she said something like, could have been man, could have been a woman, could have been an older person, younger. I don't remember all the facts, but she said something very sarcastically. And she said, you know, you people can't try on stuff here at Rich's. And obviously, it upset Martin King III. And so he threw the thing on the desk and they walked out. That's not important to the story. Martin King III was a bit embarrassed. That wasn't important to the story. Martin King III had to fight back his own anger and his own tension, and so that he would walk in the spirit of love that he preached about. But I come by to tell you, that's not important to the story. What's important to the story is that Dr. King describes that experience. as the moment for himself when he said, I'm going to give myself to the Lord and I'm going to fight against this thing called racism. So I come by to tell you, my brothers and my sisters, that we all have transformative experiences. That's why it's important for you to bring your kids to church. That's why it's important for you to have them sit there. That's why it's important for them to hear the word of the Lord. Because it's by hearing that we are moved. It's by hearing that we learn. Not only that, as King experienced, we have to not only hear it, but we also have to see people doing it. We have to put them in environments where they can begin to model that which people talk about. So very often people see people talking it, but not walking it. And lastly, it's important for us to have and to connect the dots for our own experiences. Dr. King had what was called a transformative experience. He didn't allow the pain of that moment to grip him and cause him to be bitter, and cause him to be angry. But what did he do? He allowed it to become a calling in his life. And when we think about how Dr. King went on to Morehouse, and he entered Morehouse at the age of 14, and he finished at 18, and at the age of 18, he went on to accept his call to ministry, and he went to Crozier School of Theology, and he finished there and went to Boston University. But while he was at Morehouse and while he was at Crozier, he would continue to hear great speakers, and he would hear Howard Thurman, who had come back from India, and as he sat at Sale Hall in Morehouse, and he heard Howard Thurman talk about Gandhi and talk about nonviolence and talked about how nonviolence was not just a tool to be passive, but it was a tool for social change. Somewhere along the line, Dr. King said, I'm called to this work. He went on to Boston University and was working on his PhD. And he had met and knew, because of his father's association, that there were so many people that had PhD work but didn't have the degree. They had taken classes, but they had not quieted themselves and separated themselves so that they could write the dissertation to get the degree that they sought after. When Dr. King had finished his work, his basic coursework at Boston University, because of who he was and because of who his father was, he could have gone anywhere. He could have done anything. He could have taken a position back at Morehouse, and he could have gone to any Ivy League school up in the north. But he decided, listen to this, he decided that I'm going to go to Montgomery, Alabama, to this small church. It's an educated church, a church where teachers are there, middle-class people are there. I'm going to go there, I can preach every Sunday, and I can finish my dissertation. Andy Young told me, and I would ride with Andy. I was a student intern in the Andrew Young's office, and he would always remind me and remind others in speeches, is that the strange ways of God are such that no matter what we do, our destiny finds us. You can't hide from your destiny. You can't run from your destiny. Your destiny, if there's a call upon your life. Dr. King went to Montgomery not to get in the movement. He went there because it was a quiet place. It was a supportive place for him to finish his degree. But while he was there, the NAACP was sick and tired of being sick and tired. The NAACP had been working for some months to deal with the oppression in public accommodations. While he was there, sitting in his office, I'm going to talk for a minute about 4 great movements of Dr. King. Let me tell you, while he was sitting in his office, the NAACP had planned a bus strike. They had planned to identify someone to challenge the system of oppression. And the Bible tells us there, we know that when there's a call upon your life, you can't hide from it. When there's a call upon your life, Dr. King, you're writing your dissertation, but you hear the voice crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. And Dr. King was there when Rosa Parks and others. We know now that there were others on that bus, and there were others who took a seat. And while they were taking a seat, they were actually standing up for justice. Listen to this, my brothers and my sisters. Dr. King, because he was young, Dr. King, because he was an outsider, Dr. King, because he was articulate, Dr. King, because he was not caught up in the preacher politics, all the things that he tried to avoid were the things that made him the perfect person to lead the Montgomery bus boycott. And they said, you know, we got to bring all the preachers together. We got to bring all the politicians together, and we can use Brother Smith, or we can use Brother Johnson, and there's a history there, or no, this faction don't like him, and no, he's with this group, or he's with that group. And Dr. King became the perfect person to lead the movement. You can't run from your destiny. I'm going to talk also about how he and Dr. Lowry and others got together and they said, it's time for us to start a movement. And they formed the Southern Christian Conference to address oppression from a Christian perspective. Their first site of action was in Albany, Georgia. And it was students there and community people there protesting segregation. Let me tell you, I'm not going to be long, but let me tell you, we don't know what it's like to not be able to go in the front door of a store, that they will accept your money on the back door, but you can't go in the front door. You don't know what it's like to walk past a playground or walk past a swimming pool and seeing white kids having fun at playgrounds, but as a black person, you can't go. We don't know what it's like to not being able to go into a restaurant and sit down and have a good meal. The people in Albany got tired, and Dr. King and SCLC went there. But you see, you got to understand, there was in Albany a sheriff named Sheriff Pritchett, who had studied the Gandhi movement, and he had studied what happened in Montgomery. And he said that if we arrest these people, it's going to draw more attention. That if we fill up the jails, it's going to cause more attention. And so they didn't change the laws, but they stepped back. Their actions countered the efforts of Dr. King in Albany. And some people would say that Albany was a place of learning, not a place of failure. They did not accomplish what they wanted to accomplish.